Hey friends, welcome back to the Animal Nerd Podcast. I'm your host, an incredibly articulate parrot, and I am so happy that you're here. Today, for the first time since starting the show, we're going to be talking about a rodent. But not just any rodent. Today's episode is about a rat who made history and saved the lives and limbs of an unknown number of people. Yes, really! This is the story of Magawa. Magawa was a Gambian pouched rat, a species also known as the African giant pouched rat. And how giant are these rats? Well, if you include the tail, they can grow up to 90 centimetres or 3 foot long. The height of a human toddler. If you want to compare that to the brown rat, which is the species you're most likely to have encountered, as they're the most common ones found around human settlements and are also the species that were domesticated into the pet fancy rat, they can grow to a maximum of about 51 centimetres or 20 inches. And that's the upper limit. Many of them are smaller, with some fully grown individuals only coming to 25 centimetres long, which is just under 10 inches. And all of these measurements are including tails. So yeah, the Gambian pouched rat is about twice as long as a typical rat. And I know some of you are listening to this feeling really grossed out at just the thought of a rat that size, but I promise you, if you stick around, then by the end of this episode, you'll never look at the rat the same way again. Magawa was born in Tanzania, and he wasn't some skulking sewer rat. Rather, he was born in the Sokoine University of Agriculture in the city of Morogoro. As well as being ranked as the second best university in all of Tanzania, the SUA is also home to the operational headquarters of APOPO, or APOPO. I'm not sure which way it's supposed to be pronounced, but I'm going with APOPO for this episode because it's quicker to say and also just more fun. APOPO stands for the Anti-Personnel Landmines Detection Production Development. And if you're wondering why the initials don't match up, that's because its name is actually in Dutch, and the one I read you was a translation. But I thought I'd save you my inevitable butchering of the Dutch language. As a teenager, I actually went through a phase of trying to teach myself Dutch, but that doesn't mean that I'm any good at it. APOPO is a Belgian NGO, and they were originally based there, but since 2000 moved their headquarters to the SUA, as that was when they were actually ready to start putting the rats into fieldwork. But okay, what are these rats doing? What fieldwork? Why is an international charity breeding and training giant rats? Well, you might have picked up from the translated name, or you might have just heard about it in the media, but the APOPO rats are trained to sniff out landmines. The roots for APOPO go back to the 1990s, when its future co-founders Christoph Cox and Bart Waitjens wanted to help find a solution to the global problem of landmines, which at that time were claiming over 26,000 lives every single year. Landmines are known to disproportionately affect civilians, people with no connection to the conflict which put them there, and once the explosives are in the ground, they are quite literally a ticking time bomb until someone steps on one of them. Which could be decades after they were placed, long after whatever war or conflict it was has passed. You could be a child who wasn't even born when the landmine was put in place, a child whose parents weren't even born, but you could still be a victim of them while out playing with your friends or walking to school. They are truly indiscriminate, and the damage they do is horrific. Those who are lucky enough to survive the blast are often left with lifelong injuries as a result, including frequently a loss of limbs. Landmines were lurking under the surface in countries all around the world, and something had to be done to deal with them. But detecting and removing landmines is incredibly difficult. Obviously, it's very dangerous work, and even just trying to find them is a struggle as they're designed to be imperceptible from the surface. The most expensive and time-consuming part of removing landmines is the detection process, and it was learning that led to Christoph Cox trying to find alternatives, to innovate new methods of landmine detection that were easier, cheaper, and quicker, to allow communities to get their land back as soon as possible. But Waitjens owned pet rats himself, and when he read an article about gerbils being trained to detect certain scents, he wanted if a similar thing could be achieved with rats. After all, rats were highly intelligent, but they were also cheap and literally everywhere. Could it be possible that rats could be trained to detect landmines? I mean, obviously we all know the answer to that already, but shh, let me tell you the story. They began experimenting with training domesticated fancy rats, and trying to garner support for what to a lot of people must have seemed an absolutely ridiculous idea. Ultimately though, they decided to focus on training Gambian pouched rats. They were, of course, native to Africa, a continent with a lot of landmines to be dealt with, and so would be able to withstand the conditions there. But perhaps the biggest advantage was the fact that they could live up to 8 years, over twice the lifespan of a fancy rat, which means they could work for longer and have longer to be trained. After importing some pouched rats from the SUA in Tanzania, they began breeding and training them in Belgium to see if their plan could actually work. They began building a team, and though it took a while to be able to successfully breed them in captivity, they were soon proving that both brown and pouched rats could be trained to detect TNT, the explosive chemical used in landmines, including ones that had been buried. And that was when they moved to Tanzania and began training the rats in special training fields. It took 4 years of fine-tuning, but by July 2004, a group of 11 mine detection rats were officially licensed by an independent body, allowing them to go out into the field and start detecting real landmines. Now, you might be thinking that, hold on, so they're just sending these rats out to places littered with explosives? Aren't the rats just going to trigger the landmines themselves? Are they detecting landmines by just blowing rats up? Well, no. Landmines are detonated when a weight is put on top of them. That weight would typically be about 5 kilograms or 11 pounds. So a human stepping on it, a vehicle passing over, anything like that would absolutely set it off. But rats, even giant rats, are obviously a lot smaller and lighter than people, with their weights typically coming in at under 3 pounds or 1.3 kilograms, which means the rats can safely pass over a landmine without any risk of it detonating. In over 20 years of using rats this way, APOPO have never had a single case of a rat being killed or injured from an explosive device. I mean, if you think about it, people making landmines are going to want to make sure that a small animal like a rodent isn't going to set them off, because the whole point of them is to kill people or destroy military vehicles. No one's going to waste the time and resources making mines that are going to be wasted on random passing wildlife. So, using rats to detect landmines eliminates the risk of detonation. But that's not the only benefit that the rats have over people. The rats are also way, way faster than a human would be. This is because for a human to search for landmines, they have to use a metal detector, which will alert to potential landmines, yes, but also to just any random pieces of scrap metal found in the ground, of which there are typically a lot. The rats, on the other hand, are trained specifically to detect the scent of TNT, so it's only that they respond to. If something isn't an explosive, then they're not going to give a signal, and thus time isn't going to be wasted on something that isn't a danger. For a human with a metal detector to clear an area the size of a tennis court, it would take about 4 days, but for a trained rat, it takes only half an hour. So you can probably see what an absolute game changer these rats were. And how do you actually train a rat to sniff out explosives? Well, it's really no different to training your dog to sit or come on command. The rats are trained using only positive reinforcement, specifically using bananas as a reward. And so it's not as though their welfare suffers at all from the work they're doing. If anything, they enjoy it, the same way a pet enjoys performing tricks for treats. These rats are out here saving lives, and they don't have a clue, they just think they're having a cool fun time with their human friends. APOPO have since operated in multiple different countries across Africa and Southeast Asia. As of the time of recording, they've destroyed nearly 163,000 landmines and other explosives, returning over 107 million square metres of land, that's over 1 billion square feet, and freeing over 2 million people from the threat of explosives. And without their incredible trained rats, none of what they do would be possible. Not bad for a species most people would write off as nothing but disgusting disease-carrying vermin. And actually, speaking of rats and disease, APOPO don't just train rats to detect landmines anymore, they've also trained up rats to detect tuberculosis as well. For most of us living in the global north, tuberculosis, or TB, is something that we associate with the past, an illness of our Victorian ancestors. But in reality, TB is still running rampant across large swaths of the human population. Worldwide, it's actually the second deadliest infectious disease after COVID-19, with over 100 million new cases each year and over 1 million deaths. Tuberculosis is a bacterial infection, which means that it can be treated by antibiotics, although as with most illnesses, treatment is most effective the earlier the condition is caught. And getting treatment early with TB is particularly important as it can be hard to treat even with antibiotics, because of specific stuff with the bacteria that I'm really not qualified to go into details on for fear of getting something wrong, and accidentally spreading medical misinformation. The point is, TB is still a very real and dangerous threat for a lot of people around the world, especially in the global south, and so it's vital to find new ways to improve the speed of diagnostic tests without compromising on accuracy. The typical way of checking for TB involves examining a mucus sample through a microscope, but this takes time, and in some countries, this method identifies less than half of cases. So where do the rats come into this? Well, it starts the same way it did before the rats came onto the scene. Patients with symptoms will give a sample, which is then put through the conventional diagnostic process. Afterwards, the samples, including those which the microscopy said were clear, will be collected and taken to APOPO's laboratory. The samples are then all made safe, so that there's no risk of the rats or their human handlers becoming ill. The samples are then given to a rat. The rat is rewarded for signalling to all of the samples that tested positive, the ones that were already known to have TB, which helps to keep them accurate and excited. But the rat will also go over other samples, and will signal to any others which smell of TB. These samples are then flagged as suspect, and are then put through further testing using methods endorsed by the World Health Organization, which will help give an accurate answer once and for all. So it's not all down to the rats, but they still play a key role in increasing the efficiency, as well as being able to help prevent cases from going undiagnosed. A rat can check 100 samples in less than 20 minutes. If that was all being done by a lab technician, it would take at least 4 days. The inclusion of the rats has increased clinic detection rates by 40%. That's a lot of people being diagnosed who might not have been otherwise. A lot of people who can now be treated and who hopefully won't spread the illness to anyone else, which of course means more and more lives being saved. APOPO's TB detection work is less widespread than their landmine work, being active only in 3 countries, Tanzania, Ethiopia and Mozambique. But even so, they've still managed to screen almost 1 million samples, resulting in over 30,000 extra TB cases being detected, and thereby halting over 300,000 potential infections. I know I keep throwing a lot of numbers at you, but honestly I just think it's incredible. The impact these rats have had is honestly staggering. I mean, by this point there must be thousands of people who are only alive today because of these trained rats. APOPO's rats are nicknamed hero rats, and you can see why. I know this episode is supposed to be about just one of the hero rats, but I didn't feel I could tell the story of just one without including the incredible feats of APOPO as a whole. This episode is mainly going to be about Magawa, but I don't want to take away from the achievements of APOPO's other animals or their humans. At the time of recording, APOPO have 105 landmine detection rats and over 50 TB detecting rats, as well as a team of incredible human beings whose work with the rats makes all of this possible. But back to Magawa, finally. Like all of APOPO's hero rats, he was born in Tanzania at the Sokoine University of Agriculture on November 2013. And he had a typical APOPO upbringing. Gambian pouched rats first open their eyes when they're between 4 and 5 weeks old, and for APOPO rats, that's also the same age at which they start being socialised by trainers. The socialisation process consists of getting them used to being handled and carried around by humans, as well as exposing them to a wide range of sights, sounds, smells and noises, not really any different from how you might socialise a puppy. When Magawa was about 10 weeks old, he would have been ready to graduate to the next step of APOPO rat school by being introduced to clicker training. It's still nothing intense at this stage, just them being exposed to the sound of a clicker for the first time and learning to associate it with a food reward. Again, most people who've trained a dog will be familiar with these steps. Then, once Magawa clearly understood the concept of the clicker, he would have finally been able to move on to the exciting stuff, when he began his training to detect a certain scent. And as he was destined to become a landmine detection rat, this would have been the scent of TNT. At the beginning of the training, the scent that they're introduced to is highly concentrated, so it's as obvious as possible, and over time, as the rat learns that they're supposed to signal to the scent, its strength is reduced. They'll also begin to add in other smells to the mix, scents that the rats are supposed to ignore. This ensures that it really is the TNT or TB that they're signalling to, and not just any random scent that captures their interest. They have to know what it is that they're looking for. Over time, the area that they're training in will also be expanded, again continuing to ramp up the difficulty, until finally the rats are being trained under the exact same conditions they'll be working under when they qualify. This whole process takes a long time. Obviously, with something as important as detecting landmines and TB, you don't want to take any risks in rushing a rat through their training and risking them making any mistakes out in the field. One small mistake could cost someone their life. But in 2016, Magawa was finally ready to start his career as a landmine detection rat. He was sent to their program in Cambodia, which at that time had already been going for 2 years, and was already proving itself to be one of APOPO's most intensive projects, with millions of landmines having been laid during the Cambodian-Vietnamese War, as well as plenty of unexploded ordnances which had been dropped by the US Air Force during the Vietnam War. All in all, there was plenty of danger left behind, and plenty of work for the hero rats. Once he arrived in Cambodia, Magawa would have had to undergo external accreditation. This is basically one final test to confirm whether or not he's ready to start working in real landmine situations, and it's always carried out by an external body to ensure neutrality and thus accuracy. Magawa passed and was officially handed his accreditation, allowing him to finally get involved in the effort to save lives. And so Magawa set to work, soon proving himself to be highly efficient at his job. His handler, a woman named Mullen, who, as far as I can tell, was his handler throughout his time in Cambodia, described him as being friendly, hard-working, quick and decisive. And it wasn't just Mullen who was singing Magawa's praises. 2020 was a bad year for everyone, with perhaps the exception of the billionaires who somehow got even richer, and the UK government who were busy partying. But for Magawa, 2020 was a pretty damn good year, because that's the year he was awarded the highest honour an animal can receive, the PDSA Gold Medal. PDSA stands for the People's Dispensary for Sick Animals. It's a British charity that was established in 1917 to help care for animals in need, but in the nearly 110 years since then, it's widened its scope a lot. Initially they would offer free treatment for the pets of Londoners living in poverty during the First World War, and it just grew and grew from there. And the PDSA still treat animals for free for people who are affected by poverty in eligible areas, although they do now ask for donations. They offer reduced cost neutering, microchipping and vaccinations, as well as plenty of other work to support and improve the welfare of pets across the UK. They're one of those charities that I just really admire. I think they're doing great work. But Magawa wasn't a British pet in need, so why were the PDSA interested in him? Well, one of the other things they do is awarding honours to animals. This started in the Second World War, when they created the Dickon Medal, named after the charity's founder, Maria Dickon. The medal is to celebrate the bravery and achievements of individual animals during wartime, and at the time of recording has been awarded to 74 animals. Most of these are, as you might expect, military animals. Carrier pigeons, bomb-sniffing dogs, that kind of thing. Although there are some exceptions, such as a stray dog who, with no training, saved the lives of over 100 people during the Blitz as a search and rescue dog. And yes, there are absolutely episodes coming out about him and some of the other animals who've won the Dickon Medal too, don't you worry. The Dickon Medal is still an honour that's handed out occasionally, with the most recent recipient being a Belgian Malinois dog named Bass, or Base, who saved soldiers' lives in Afghanistan in 2019. But the Dickon Medal is only available to animals whose actions were in the context of an actively ongoing war, and that wasn't the case with Magawa. Yes, those landmines and bombs were remnants of war, but the wars had long since passed, which meant that he couldn't be eligible for a Dickon Medal no matter how many lives he saved. But in 2001, the PDSA introduced a new award, the PDSA Gold Medal. Like the Dickon Medal, it's for animals who show extreme bravery and devotion to duty, only this one is specifically for animals whose actions fall outside of wartime. Most of the animals who've been awarded this medal are just everyday pets and service dogs who happen to have saved someone's life, although some of them are police dogs who carried out their duties despite being injured. Up until 2020 though, every one of the 29 animals who'd been awarded the PDSA Gold Medal had been a dog. Dogs of varying breeds and from varying countries, but still all dogs. Which is why when it was announced that Magawa, a rat, was to be the 30th animal to be decorated with the medal, it garnered quite a bit of media attention, which by extension also helped shine a light on the life-saving work of APOPO and all of their hero rats. But why was Magawa specifically chosen to receive the medal over the other trained rats? Well, that's because over the 4 years that Magawa had been working in Cambodia, he'd become APOPO's most successful demining rat ever. He'd already located 39 landmines and 28 pieces of unexploded ordnance, and had helped clear over 1.5 million square foot of land. As is tradition, the medal was presented to Magawa at a special ceremony, although it had to be held online because, 2020. And they even made his medal in a special tiny rat size so he could wear it, and it is genuinely one of the cutest things I have ever seen. The Director General of the PDSA, Jan McLaughlin, said of him, quote, "Magawa's work directly saves and changes the lives of men, women and children who were impacted by the landmines. Every discovery he makes reduces the risk of injury or death for local people. Magawa's dedication, skill and bravery are an extraordinary example of this and deserve the highest possible recognition." End quote. I realise you could argue that Magawa's actions aren't necessarily brave, as he doesn't really understand what he's doing or the dangers of landmines, and even if he did, he wouldn't be at risk of detonating them himself, but let the boy have his moment. Even if he thinks he's just out playing with Marlin and getting tasty treats, he's done so much for humanity that he deserves a bit of VIP treatment. I mean, to be fair, rats also have no concept of honours or rewards, but I think it's pretty safe to assume that as well as his shiny gold medal, he was also given plenty of his favourite foods as a thank you for his service. And if you're wondering, his favourite foods were apparently bananas, watermelon and peanuts. But despite his newfound status as the first rodent to receive the world's greatest animal honour, Magawa wasn't ready to hang up his harness just yet. He returned to work detecting explosives, although it was no secret that he was in the twilight of his career. Hero rats tend to only work for 4 or 5 years, at which point they're retired and get to live out the rest of their days in their lap of luxury, which is the least they deserve after all they've done for humans. But Magawa didn't become the world's best demining rat for nothing, and he kept working for another year until it was finally decided in May 2021 that he should retire from his work. He still enjoyed it as much as ever, but he was starting to slow down a little, and the humans of APOPO certainly felt that he had earned his retirement. At the time of his retirement, Magawa had managed to bring his total number of explosives detected to over 100, 71 landmines and 38 pieces of unexploded ordnance. Each one of those 109 devices had the ability to kill or permanently maim an innocent civilian, and were it not for Magawa, they could still be in the earth now, waiting for a victim. Over his 5-year-long career, he had successfully cleared an area equivalent to more than 20 football pitches. And speaking of football pitches, apparently the rats' handlers had so much faith in their rodents' abilities to sniff out every landmine in an area that they would often prove/test that the land was safe afterwards by playing football on it, which is kinda cool. We'll never know exactly how many lives were saved by Magawa's contributions, but I think it's safe to say that he had well and truly earned the title of Hero Rat. And so Magawa ended his retirement, spending his days playing, eating, and just generally living a pampered life befitting of a decorated hero. In January 2022, it was announced by APOPO that Magawa had passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 8. He had remained as bright and active as ever up until the last week of his life, when he had begun to slow down a little, spending more time sleeping and less time eating. But thankfully it wasn't a painful, drawn-out illness or anything, just old age. Magawa's legacy lives on, though, in the lives of the humans who he saved. And the work of APOPO and the Hero Rats continues. Shortly before his retirement, a group of 20 new young rats were brought over to Cambodia, all of whom received their official accreditation, and Magawa apparently spent the last few weeks of his career mentoring the youngsters and helping them settle into their new life. As far as I'm aware, Magawa's title of most successful demining rat still remains, although I'm not sure it would necessarily be a bad thing if it was beaten, as that would just mean many more lives had been saved. Landmines and unexploded ordnance continue to be a threat around the world, but with the work of APOPO and their incredible hero rats, ensuring the safety of affected communities is easier, quicker and more affordable than ever, and they continue to work towards the goal of eliminating them worldwide. And actually, it's not just rats who are saving lives with APOPO. They also have a team of hero dogs as well. They have a much smaller team of them, 50 dogs across 4 countries, but the dogs are an essential part of landmine detection, as they're able to work over terrain that would be too difficult for the rats, especially in areas that have high levels of vegetation. Like the rats, the dogs are trained to sniff out the chemical compound in explosives, and a single dog can clear an area of up to 4,000 square metres in this difficult traverse terrain in a day. That's over 43,000 square foot. To date, the hero dogs have located almost 180 explosives, and just like with the rats, they're trained with nothing but positive reinforcement and seem to genuinely love the work that they do. APOPO also have a hero tree project ongoing too. Yes, I said tree. I mean, the trees aren't trained to do stuff. If they could, that would be far too impressive just to be tacked onto the end of an episode. Rather, the trees are intended to help local communities by improving soil and water quality, improving food security, and preserving biodiversity, as well as, of course, the benefits the trees have in fighting climate change. It also looks like they might be training rats as search and rescue animals, but I couldn't find too much about that, so I think that's in the early stages. But yeah, APOPO are just all-round good eggs, doing good work, and I will of course have them linked in the show notes if you feel inspired to check out more of their work and support them. The work they do is honestly just incredible. I mean, they really are just out here saving lives, and the fact that they can do it all without ever compromising on the welfare of the animals they use is really impressive. So yeah, if you want to donate to them, then all of the information you need for that will be in the show notes, along with the sources used for this episode, and lists to our social media and other contact info. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of the Animal Nerd Podcast. If you enjoyed it, then it would mean the world to me if you could support the show in any way you can, whether that's through leaving it a positive review or rating, subscribing through whatever app you're listening to this through, sharing it with your friends, liking the video and leaving a comment if you're listening via YouTube. It all really makes a difference and enables me to keep making these episodes. New episodes come out every single Tuesday, plus bonus minisodes on random days at least once a month, so I will hopefully see you then. Stay wild, friends!